Actually, it was a lot like spiritual epiphany. And
Okay.
before that, I would have experiences, psychic experiences, but I wouldn't want to talk about it with anybody. I buried it inside myself. I was working overseas. I was doing intelligence work. I wouldn't talk about psychic things. I kept it very hidden. So after I had the near-death experience, I decided that I would not hide that anymore. It changed me completely. That you couldn't die, that there was no reason to be afraid of anything, that God was a white light energy. And so I was telling everybody this, and the military was saying, maybe something is wrong with Joe, you know. The way it happened is they said, how do we find people that are psychic in the military? They said, well, we'll look at people who did jobs where they shouldn't have been able to do those kinds of jobs very well for very long. And they discovered that I was one of those people. So they called me in, and when they opened my file, they discovered that I had had this near-death experience and met God and had no fear and talked a great deal about my spirituality change. And they said, oh, this person must be perfect for our job. So they called me in, and they sent me to Stanford Research Institute, had me tested, and I turned out to be an excellent remote viewer. The original investigation into remote viewing started in 1972 at Stanford Research Institute. That was when Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff first started their investigation into remote viewing. The U.S. military did not actually start the Stargate project until October of 1978. That was the actual use of remote viewing for intelligence collection purposes. We were just another collection methodology, and so when we provided our intelligence, it was included just like any other intelligence methodology. It was just sent in and used and analyzed just like any other methodology. There's kind of a belief that because so many agencies use the remote viewers that the military supported remote viewing. That it really isn't true. Because it was successful and because so many agencies used it, doesn't mean that the Army was happy about it. It was more like a knife fight in a phone booth every year. It got funded because it was successful, but it was funded by Congress. And so Congress kind of forced the issue, forced that it be used because of its success from year to year. Remote viewing's been demonstrated in many labs in many countries by many different researchers using different kinds of remote viewing protocols. So remote viewing is a replicable example of psi. I do missing persons cases. That's much more difficult. Some people don't want to be found. Some people are moving a lot, so the information has got to be used very quickly. Sometimes the information is hard to equate to an actual location on the ground. When you do remote viewing information, it's very difficult to be precise. Information sometimes looks the same for different cities. When I develop information for a missing person, I have to describe the city, the location within the city, the neighborhood within the location, the building within the neighborhood, and all these things have to be very, very precise. And when you're dealing in Japan, as an example, within Tokyo, there's 16 million people in Tokyo. The city's 160 by 80 miles. All the buildings in some areas for an 8 mile area all look alike. As an example, in my demonstrations of remote viewing on national level television, I've done now 86 demonstrations of remote viewing. That's on television. Out of those, I've done, in Japan as an example, I've had 13 appearances on television in Japan. That's done live on camera. I've looked for 26 missing people on television. I've found 10. And I provide remote viewing support to corporations and people. I find minerals, oil and gas is not a problem. I find gold, silver, platinum. I make a large amount of money for companies. Bob Monroe was the person who I was doing the remote viewing with. And when he provided the targets, they were provided as coordinates. The first target, when I got the coordinate, was a pyramid, but it was a very bizarre pyramid. It seemed to be much larger, and it had funny rooms in it that were different from pyramids I understood. I commented that I believe this pyramid must be a new discovery because it was different. And we went to the next target, and it was a ruin, and I described that. I went from target to target, and as I was doing these targets, I was getting an impression of great age, very ancient targets. And so when I was asked how old these were, I said, oh, these are at least 1 million years old. These are very old. And that didn't make sense to me. And another funny thing about this particular target, one of the targets I was working on, I said, the sun looks very strange, very bizarre. So when I was through, and I finished all of the remote viewing, I came out of the remote viewing room because it was a dark room that I was in. And I was standing and talking to Robert Monroe. And then Skip Atwater came into the room, and he said, do you know what targets you were working on? And I said, yes, they were ruins somewhere. And he said, you were working on
What you're suggesting is that there is actually a possibility to change all these fear-based.
Absolutely.